Hey guys, and welcome to our third episode of the Plains on the Prairie podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Max.
All right, and we got a really special episode for you today. We're going to be talking about the Battle of Britain. We got a few events to go through right away, and we're actually here at the Fargo Air Museum. And Max, you're the intern in here today.
Yeah. So today's episode is pretty special. We're filming with the backdrop of the main hangar of the Fargo Air Museum. Looks like someone's looking into the hangar right now. Whatever. Sorry. But yeah, we're hoping that we can start filming here more often since I have the internship here. So yeah, look for a walk around of the airplanes here in the future, hopefully. But yeah, we'll get started with the show then.
Yeah. So we got a few news events. There was one video I came across a couple weeks ago. We've both been pretty busy with some school stuff and internship stuff. So we haven't been able to get onto a podcast episode. We have a video we found of Cessna 172 in Knoxville, Tennessee, that made an emergency landing on one of their interstates there, and they were able to do the maintenance on the interstate on the roadside there, and ended up getting police escort, and they shut down the entire set of lanes on that stretch of the interstate.
Looking at the footage right now, I know you guys probably can't see it, but you might be aware of it. He flies under is he still taxiing by the time he goes underneath?
Yeah, he's starting his takeoff roll right there under the bridge.
That is insane. Oh gosh.
It's definitely it takes some finesse to get a curve going around a curve like that. The rotation speed of a 172 is around 55 miles an hour. So
I would have a very high pucker factor for that one.
Yeah, and you're going a little bit slower than those cars probably, but an airplane produces a lot more lift than an F-150.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we'll post the link down below the YouTube video. So for you guys watching this on video, we'll be able to see that. So yeah, really interesting. Something I hope I never have to do in my career. But so yeah, and then next event is there was a lot of naval aviation mishaps here in August. So that's something we don't want to see happen. I believe there's 2 Hawkeyes that had some incidents occur. So, and then I forgot the drone name. It's a helicopter drone.
And I've never heard of
it. Yeah, it's a picture in the article. We'll drop it below. It looks like the link's not working here. But yeah, it's something they don't want to see. The overall accidents and incidents with the U.S. Navy has declined since 2019 so far, to date since last August in 2019. But and I think the one was a Prowler as well. So there's 4 pretty major things. So that's something you don't want to see with manned aircraft, especially because of the life factor is a lot more than an airplane. So
was anyone hurt in these accidents?
I don't believe any. I believe there might have been some minor injuries, but there's no injuries related to the unmanned one with surrounding aircraft. I believe both the Hawkeyes were okay. I think it was the Prowler, but correct me if I'm wrong if you guys see that article while you're watching this. But it's been a couple of days since I've reviewed it. But yeah, the next one is a really interesting update on the Columbine 2. It's a Constellation that was Dwight D. Eisenhower's personal aircraft while he's president. So
yeah, we're looking at warbirdnews.com, and looks like the restoration is going very well. Did you see anything in there that was noteworthy?
No, but it was really nice to see just they're doing some work on the engine cowlings and just with those curved features on metalworking. I don't know if you've dealt with any metalworking.
I have not, but it's an art.
It is definitely an art, and it's they're making this aircraft pristine, and it's a beautiful. The Constellation's a beautiful aircraft that needs to be perfect. So
I've only had the fortune of seeing one Constellation, and it was at the Museum of Flight in Seattle.
Okay.
And I mean, that one's just sitting there. Like, imagine seeing one take off, and this one's all polished aluminum. Just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Feel bad for the people that have to polish it.
Yeah.
I mean, I like
I believe I think the company that bought her has enough funds to keep her looking good.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
That's for sure. So yeah, it's cool to see some restoration updates going on. And then one kind of in the air defense news is the Greeks purchased, I believe it was 27 Dassault Rafales in their defense buildup. I don't know if you guys have been reading up, or I don't know if you've been reading up on just some foreign policy type stuff, but Turkey and Greece are back at it again with some increased tensions. So that'll be interesting to see. And I believe they're updating F-16s as well.
Oh, really?
And they're planning on finishing those total updates by, I think, 2028, they said in the article. Wow. So they're planning on having those for quite a few years. But
modern updated fleet.
Yep. So and that'll be a good thing for NATO, just to have, I mean, they're both NATO members, but Turkey's been always kind of a rocky one since Erdogan's come in. But
does Turkey still fly the Phantoms, or have they retired theirs?
I believe they retired all of them. I want to say most of the Phantoms that are still in service are like the QF. So and then
I think
Japan.
I think Japan, I think, retired theirs last year. I think South Korea still flies theirs.
I believe so. And I think Greece might actually.
Okay.
I know they had them in service for a while. But yeah, so that's something interesting to see. I mean, it's unfortunate these tensions have to rise and things like that, but it is cool to see some updated F-16s and some new purchase of some pretty sick jets.
Cool.
So yeah, and then how do you think the internship's going so far?
It's going.
Yeah.
Nothing starts off 100% smooth. Nothing bad or anything like that. It's just, getting into the rhythm of things. Like, this is kind of the career that I want to have. So putting my foot in the door in a career that I want to have for the rest of my life is different from, let's say, I've done landscaping for the past 5 summers, whereas I went into those jobs knowing like this is only temporary.
Right.
But this is like, okay, I want to make sure I do everything perfectly the first time. And if anyone that's ever tried anything knows, very rarely, if ever, do you do something right the first time.
Exactly.
So I've had to teach myself to like hear criticism, and I've heard criticisms a lot, but in a field that I came into thinking, oh, I know a lot about this already, I have a lot to learn. And I think anyone and everyone can take a learning lesson from that, whether it's in aviation or school or life in general.
Well, yeah, and it's like I volunteered here for my entire time through late elementary school all the way up through high school. And when I was first getting here, I was the only one at my elementary. I was in 4th grade when I started here. I remember thinking, oh, I know a lot about airplanes, and just because I was the only one at school who was into this stuff. And when I got here, it was a smack in the face of how much more is out there. And I mean, both of us combined, we barely know a fraction of everything out there.
And the history that's just behind us, you'll probably never learn everything. And
exactly. And that's the fun of it.
You're learning new things.
Something's new every day. So,
well, I think we're ready to get started on the main topic of the show, the Battle of Britain. So, if you're listening to our show, you're probably very familiar with it. We're just going to kind of go over a brief overview in lieu of the Battle of Britain Day, which was September 15th, 2020 this year. I guess where do we start?
Well, I guess you can go as far back as the war starting itself. I mean, the whole war was something brand new for aviation. Yes, you had a few conflicts. You got World War One, and you got some of the minor conflicts in there. You got the Spanish Civil War, which is a huge trial for aerial warfare. But you really hadn't seen it into full effect. The Blitz, for example, that the combined use of ground and the coordination of ground and air forces together was something huge. I mean, it was something. And they were so traditional, and especially on the Allied side, with the French, they were kind of that World War One mindset. So they're a lot of aircraft. They still had scout aircraft as a primary source of aircraft, and they got the Allied side was very late to the defense buildup. I mean, yes, you had Spitfires, you had Hurricanes, you had D-520s in very limited numbers on the French side, but you had that. The Germans always had that strategic advantage. I mean, if any of you are into football or something, you got an offense who can just dominate one year, but they don't change their playbook.
No.
So that's exactly how it happened in their playbook. Germany changed their playbook from World War One, and they had very strong. They
I,
have
re- I
good
remember,
tacticians.
yeah. You look at some of the German generals, and it was just a league of their own.
Yeah, and with their force, I don't. It's against a lot of people think Germany was just unstoppable with the size of their forces in the early part of the war, but they really weren't. They were less in numbers than the French, even the British. They weren't as dominant as it may seem. It was the tactics.
Well, there's a lot of like there's a book that a friend of mine recommended to me that dispelled like many of the myths behind the German war machine during the war. And one thing that I like, Hollywood movies make it seem like Germans, it's like all they had was trucks and tanks. Whereas if you take a genuine look at it, they was horse drawn.
Right, they were very horse drawn.
Very horse drawn. And you see that it's like, so this whole image of a mechanized German army, I mean, it was there, but it wasn't in the strength that you think it was. And kind of going back to the topic of generals, you had a lot of these generals were on the ground as like young lieutenants or like fresh out of training in the First World War, and they saw how terrible it was. And that's why I also I need to start taking notes on these books that I read. But the French, especially the French generals, were so they did not want a repeat of trench warfare, and they prepared. Like that was the mindset. They thought that the Second World War was going to be a repeat of the first, so that's why they had the Maginot Line. Pardon the butchering of that pronunciation. Like all these defensive networks, and the Germans just went right by them,
right through the Ardennes.
Yep, right through the Ardennes. And like, I don't know. I think looking at how both the First World War and the Second World War started, and the similarities and differences between the two, especially when you add aviation and its significance into the Second World War, it definitely makes it much more, I don't want to say interesting, that's not the correct term, but it adds another level of I'm confusing myself on this tangent, but you know what I'm getting at.
So. Well, I mean, if you look at the invasion of Poland, you get the invasion of the Low Countries in France.
Yep.
They used a lot of close air support, so like dive bombers, the Stukas. But the Battle of Britain really saw a shift from that. They started using the Stukas on the Dover radar systems, but they soon found out that the Stukas were way more vulnerable against a very formidable air force. I mean, yes, the French, to an extent, were formidable, but they lacked the response times, and a lot of the air force was wiped out on the ground. Whereas Britain had that early warning radar system. That's not a lot of people think that's the entire reason they won the battle, which isn't. There's way too many factors to go together in it. But the Stukas, in a dive, they get slow. And they're slow and dirty. So dirty, for those of you who aren't big into aviation or like big into the aerodynamic side, dirty means you have flaps in or gear down or things like that. But the Stuka, as many of you know, had fixed gear. So you're producing a high amount of drag. And in a dive, the purpose of dive bombers is to be slow in a dive so you don't stress out your airframe too much. But that's a big trade-off for your speed and maneuverability. So, because your control effectiveness slows down. I'm getting on an aerodynamics rant.
Oh no, that's fascinating.
But they were found to be very vulnerable. So, but the Germans were very successful in eliminating the airfields, or making them out of service temporarily, because that was their prime focus for majority of the battle, and it looked like they were going to win for a very long time. The repetitive bombings of the fields. You had the lack of experience on the British pilots. I don't know if you've seen
touch on the 1969 movie.
Yeah,
oh, it's a classic. So. No, but I was like, you had mentioned the Spanish Civil War, and you compare like how much combat experience, like some of these British pilots, I don't think any of them flew. I mean, maybe covertly, but that's implying something. But the German, they had the Condor Legion, and they were fighting against Russian and Spanish. Was it communists, I believe?
Yep, the Republican force there. Yep. Communist backed, yeah. So, and they did have the Superior aircraft due to their industry. But yeah, the experience levels were way different, especially at the start of the battle. I know through the whole course of the war that really changed. German pilots became very short on pilots in Germany towards the end of the war. Um, and they lost a lot of their excellent pilots over Britain because they were flying over. They had the disadvantage of flying over enemy territory. They were always in enemy territory in a lot of their early war offenses, and I don't. There's a lot of factors that go into play there, but you know, we can just break down the aircraft now. Probably,
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you got from the British side, the main two fighter aircraft are the Spitfires and Hurricanes, very popular aircraft. You guys know I'm pretty biased towards the Hurricane, but the Spitfires were predominantly used as an interceptor for the fighters. The Hurricanes were sent up more for the bombers, just due to the less maneuverability of the aircraft, and they were inferior to the 109 in a lot of the aerodynamic aspects.
They were much more heavily armored, though, weren't they?
They were.
They could take more of a beating.
They could, yes. The aircraft themselves, the Spitfire and the Hurricane, had similar engines. They were carbureted Merlin engines. There was a disadvantage to the carbureted engines, though, as in a negative G maneuver. The engine would actually cut out because you're cutting off that fuel flow to the engine.
Really? Wow.
Whereas the 109s and the Daimler-Benz engines, they were fuel injected, so you have fuel always injected, or it's being literally injected into the cylinders and mixed there. So there are many advantages and disadvantages. So I can talk about the 109 as well. The Spitfire and the 109 are very comparable. The 109E and the Mark 1s and Mark 1As of the Spitfire, and they had similar capabilities, different armaments. Obviously, a 20 millimeter is much more effective than a 303, which the 20 millimeter is what the 109s were armed with. You also had the 13.7 millimeters as well, but the British had armed the majority of their fighters with 303s, and both the Hurricane and the Spitfire had the 8 303s, and you had, in my opinion, there's superior firepower to the 109, but with the Hurricanes and Spitfires, you had higher volume of weapons. So, it's kind of a trade-off for rate of fire, and if you're into weaponry, if you have a higher caliber, you're typically going to have a lower rate of fire. But then you get into turning radiuses if you're to put a 109 and a Spitfire into a dogfight, you find that the Spitfire is a little bit more superior in the turning radius in a turning fight, as long as the pilots significantly are the same. I guess if a pilot is better on the German side, you could make a good case for a turning fight, but in the end, they're really similar.
You put the same pilot or comparable pilots at the same skill set, and
it gives the bomber crew a good reason to grab some popcorn to watch that.
Exactly.
But yeah, and those were the main fighters. You had gladiators on the British side, but they didn't score any kills in the entire battle.
They were biplanes, weren't they?
Yep, Gladiator biplanes. They were pretty outdated by the time World War II rolled around. They are famous for their defensive Malta, which is something we'll cover in the future. That was kind of, when we were planning this episode, we were kind of on the fence about doing Battle of Britain or Malta. But we decided, since it's the 80th of the Battle of Britain, it's such a significant event, we went with it. But you also had Bristol Blenheims. They were night fighters. Actually did really well. They were converted to Mark 1Fs. As most of you know, they're a light bomber, light to medium bomber. But they scored really well at nighttime when the Germans did day and nighttime raids. And when they switched to doing full nighttime raids, they were the mainstay. I
was going to say, obviously in the United States, Spitfires are somewhat common. Hurricanes, not so much. But those, what did you say, Bristol
Blenheims?
Blenheims?
Yeah. No,
I don't think there's any.
I went to Oshkosh in 2016, so 4 years ago, and there was a Blenheim Mark IV cockpit section, nose section. That was on display.
On restoration, or
no, it was just actually there was this kind of like a reenactment of a field, like an airfield.
Oh, gotcha.
And they just kind of had that on display there, and it's pretty sweet to see.
That is cool. So, very cool.
Something you didn't really expect to see there. So
maybe there might be some in Canada. Maybe a road trip one of these days.
Yeah, that might be a good one to go to the museum there in Toronto.
Yeah.
So
I think the Paul Defiant, that was also
Yep, the turreted fighter.
mhm.
So yeah, the Bolton Paul Defiant, it was a radical idea for the time, just to stick with the turreted fighters, and then you can justify not having to do turning fights as much. And the problem with the Defiant is you only had the turret, you didn't have any fixed forward firing weaponry, and there's a reason you don't see this on aircraft.
No.
You don't see turreted aircraft.
Yeah, I remember as a child looking up different like Spitfires and Hurricanes, all these really cool planes, and then it came to this. It's like, oh,
I mean, it looks kind of interesting.
it does look.
but
It
looks
kind of
pretty
reminds me
sweet,
of
but-
a Sturmovik. One of
a
the
little bit, yeah. It's
IO
got a similar
yeah.
wing profile. Yeah, they weren't very successful as day fighters.
Night fighters.
Night
though,
fighters,
yeah,
they're
they were
very good, very
successful.
famous for that. But
Yeah.
those are the main British aircraft for fighters, and then obviously you have the 109 for the
Yeah.
German side.
109.
110s, the BF 110s,
yeah, BF
heavy
110s.
fighters. They were found to be quite ineffective in the battle,
Mhm.
just because they were not much more maneuverable than the HE 111s, JU 88s, and
Mhm.
DO 17s, the bombers they were protecting. And that was kind of a fault there. And a lot of people overlooked the Italian
Yep,
side.
I was gonna mention
Yeah.
the Italians were there.
Yep. They weren't very successful
No.
either, but
Well, it
you
sums
had
up
the
Italian-
CR-42s, the
Biplanes.
biplane, really sweet biplane, probably
Mhm.
the best, arguably the best biplane fighter of the war. But it was plagued by underarmament and the old mindset of the Italians. They're kind of like the French with that old mindset.
Sums up the Italian experience in the war pretty well.
Yes. But it looks like you got some bombers pulled up, so if you want to mention those.
So we'll start off. Obviously, there were like Germans loved their bombers. My personal favorite is the Junkers Ju-88. That was a medium bomber, multi-engine.
Yep.
And it went through many different iterations throughout the war, but during the Battle of Britain, it was its infancy, and I believe it was obviously quicker than the HE 111, not by much.
It was quite a fast aircraft, though.
Mhm.
I mean,
and they used them later as both night fighters and heavy fighters against
very good
bomber
night
formations.
fighters.
Yeah,
Later on, they're used as torpedo bombers too.
yeah,
and
that's true.
it's just such a sleek looking airframe. And
Then they had BF 110s, as you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier. Like you said, didn't do very. A lot of these, other than the HE 111, a lot of them they found their way throughout the war. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, maybe a heavy fighter isn't the best idea, but at night, maybe a little bit.
this entire battle is the perfect. I know it's kind of
Proving ground.
it's
I'd
a
say.
proving ground. Yes, exactly. And you see these aircraft, and you're like, why was it used as that?
Yeah.
But then that was
That,
how they found out,
That's
so.
how they found out, exactly.
But-
yeah, BF 110, and then like I said, the HE 1. I believe there was one.
the DO 17.
The pencil.
Yep,
The
flying
flying
pencil. Yep, that's actually my favorite of the three.
Really?
I like the look of them. They're really widely used in the Spanish Civil War to a lot of success. The Poland campaign, but they're starting to age out by the time the Battle of Britain came in, and later replaced by the 217s.
Yep.
So
And the 217s became night fighters as well, right? Yeah.
So all of these are actually. I don't think the Ju-88 was, but the 111 and the DO-17s were airliners.
Yeah.
During
I
the
know
defense
HE
buildup.
111 definitely was.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and you also got the BR-20 on the Italian side
Mhm.
that was used. I didn't know this for a long time, but the Japanese actually used those
Really?
BR-20s against China.
Interesting. That whole sub-conflict that deserves a podcast.
Yes,
episode. You have Chinese troops equipped by the Germans fighting.
and then
It's
the
weird.
Russians
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's one we have to cover. I mean, a little sidebar here. I don't know if you guys have watched have you seen World War II in real time? Have you heard of it? It's
Was it on a History Channel? or is
no,
it-
it's a YouTube.
Okay, yeah.
Or the Great War maybe. They go week by week chronologically through the war. So right now, like it's the 27th of September, they'd be covering a week right now,
Mhm.
and they would talk about what happened however long ago. I think they're in 1941 right now.
Really?
So they started in 39, and they've been doing it for 2.5 years. And you
That's
learn a
awesome.
lot about these conflicts. There's kind of like a day by day thing,
Mhm.
and they really are good at covering the Sino-Japanese War.
Yeah.
But the full Battle of Britain is covered there in about 3 minutes a week, and they talk about the developments of it, the Italian intervention in the Battle of Britain, and as in the 15th, where the reason we kind of came up with this is the 80th anniversary of Battle of Britain Day. Without this battle is such a significant thing, and with our podcast being aviation focused, I mean, why wouldn't we cover it? So
it was a no-brainer. Are there any aspects of the battle that you want to talk about, like a certain squadron or?
Well, you have the famous 303 squadron of the Polish.
Yep.
The Polish were so fired up after their entire country being taken over by both the Soviets and the Germans, and the atrocities on both sides. They were fed up with it and ready to get some payback on the Germans. And the Battle of Britain, they proved that time and time again. So the Polish, I believe they throughout the Battle of Britain, they operated the Hurricanes, and it's actually really well covered in the Battle of Britain movie from 1969. There's a lot of humor in there with like the miscommunications that came up with it. I don't know, you've seen the movie, like repeat please.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're such an excellent group of people and such a courageous way to pay tribute to their country.
Yeah. Well,
there's actually another movie on Netflix. I watched it. I can't remember what it was. I think it was all in Polish, but it was about the 303 squadron.
Really? Very cool.
So,
well, I think there were a lot of different squadrons that were made up of expats of many of these occupied countries.
You got the Czechs.
Yep, the Czechs.
You got a couple
Czechs
of
is
Dutch,
the one
I
that
believe.
comes to mind.
Yeah, the Czechs are a major. The Czechs and the Poles were the main two. You had people as far away as Israel as well too.
Really?
So,
I did not know that.
yeah, at the end of the movie, they actually talk about every.
Oh, I do remember.
Yeah, they have the scroll at the end in the credits. So
there were a couple of Israelis in there. Another one, very commonly talked about, is the Eagle squadrons that were made up of American volunteers before the Americans actually entered the war. I know a lot of those Eagle pilots went on to have very distinguished careers within the United States on the Air Corps during the war.
Yeah, that added experience.
Exactly.
So.
Reminds me of the Flying Tigers.
Yep.
Kind of getting a little taste. I mean, I guess Flying Tigers were already fighting before. No,
it was before Pearl Harbor for a short time. But yeah, the Eagle Squadron was an amazing group of pilots. They flew, I think, predominantly Spitfires in the battle. There is a movie out there called Eagle Squadron. I think you actually have it pulled up there. But if any of you seen the film Pearl Harbor with Ben Affleck in it,
how could you miss it?
Yeah, and that covers the Eagle Squadron a little bit.
That's what both of them were Eagle Squadron pilots in the beginning, right? And then one of them got shot down.
I believe just Ben Affleck was, but yeah, he got shot down, and but that was kind of an interesting take on it. Yeah. So yeah, this film is pretty old, but I read a book a while back on the Eagle Squadron. We'll have to just compile a list onto one of our pages. Like we have to do maybe some videos on some books, but that's a really interesting book. Covers kind of the stats of the Eagle Squadron and things like that.
Sweet.
So yeah, and those are the main two that really come to mind, and that most people know. But yeah, as many of you might know, I build scale models as well, and I like to. I have a few 303 Squadron aircraft that I've built up over the years.
Very cool.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, and then we can maybe talk a little about strategy throughout the battle.
Yeah.
Germans, as I said earlier, focused on the airfields, but then there was I believe it was an HE-111 dropped some stray bombs over. They got lost and just dropped bombs, and it happened to fall in London. So then Churchill, being Churchill, was like, all right, we gotta go to Berlin now.
Yeah.
So they didn't realize it was an accident, and Hitler did not want. He was very upset when they dropped the bombs on London because of the pushback. It wasn't necessarily, we dropped some bombs, because Hitler's knowingly done other things before that. But he was also trying to sue for a separate peace. So because
doing that, definitely.
he was afraid of Britain.
Yeah.
But anyways, he was afraid of that pushback on Berlin, and the civilian casualties that come with that on the German people. But as soon as they dropped the bombs on Berlin, Hitler's okay. We gotta demoralize these people, and
it's all or nothing at that point.
And that drew the attention away from the airfields, therefore giving those airfields time to be operable, operate aircraft more efficiently. Oh, and another thing back to the Spitfire and Hurricane comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Um, the time for them to their fuel time and time to get ready was significantly lower for the Hurricanes. I didn't know this. I think it was 26 minutes for a Spitfire to get ready.
Really?
Yeah. So if they were just stone cold not ready, they always were though.
Yeah, because that's where the scramble came from. Yeah.
Before, if they weren't scrambling, it would take 26 minutes for a Spitfire to get ready for flight, whereas in a Hurricane it would take about 9.
9.
So
wow.
Significantly less.
That is very significant.
So, and that was another thing. The scramble. It was not really a thing.
Really?
Before it was, but the British kind of, they knew which squadrons to scramble. They weren't going to scramble the wrong one.
Yeah.
And it became such an efficient thing that got up in 5 minutes or less usually. And that's saying something. I mean, when I fly my aircraft up at UND, it takes us 15, 20 minutes to get off the ground after we pre-flight.
Yep.
After we start the engine, it takes that long.
Yeah, they were not doing pre-flight checks.
No, they were just going up. But
putting a lot of faith into their crew chiefs there.
Yes. You also have that will of the people is a huge part of the reason they won the battle. Was they weren't demoralized, they weren't brought down by the bombings. It actually made them stronger.
Yeah, it strengthened their resolve.
And the British people, they knew they're close to sea lion, the British or the German invasion of the British islands, and they kept pushing it back because of their success.
Yeah,
and they were this close. If
I can't even imagine what that would have been like.
It would have. The war would have. Yeah. You can go through what ifs of the entire war, but
absolutely,
it's just you got to admire the pilots and the people, the civilian population. They wouldn't have, they had scrap metal drives to go build Spitfires.
Yep.
And the aircraft production stayed well, and the German production stagnated because Hitler was so preoccupied by Russia, the Soviet Union. He wanted to focus east, but the British kept getting in the way.
Pesky British.
So yeah, but yeah, the Battle of Britain 80th anniversary. It's kind of occurring right now. Battle ends in October.
Yeah. Is it late October? I believe.
Believe so.
Yeah.
And there's also if you have anything else to add, we can maybe transition.
Well, I was going to mention Battle of Britain is very popular in maybe not social media, but in movies. I assume many of the people that are listening to this have seen the 1969 classic. I mean, we're a bit biased, but that movie is awesome. But like Sam also mentioned, Pearl Harbor has an opening scene, and maybe not so much the Battle of Britain, but a good watch if you have the time is the first 5 minutes of the first Chronicles of Narnia movie, where it shows the Blitz from the ground. I remember, and then we'll move on, but as a kid, I went into that movie kind of like, oh, this is going to be kind of boring. And that opening scene where the German HE-111s are flying over, and a swastika is one of the first things you see in this movie about, Chronicles of Narnia with the Christian background. I was hooked. So it's definitely worth a watch if you have the time. But
yeah. And then also, actually, one more thing to add is, in the film Battle of Britain, they didn't use actual 109s. They used the Hispanos, the Spanish-built 109s. They actually have, I believe, this 109, or it's the HE one, or I forgot what it's, the 112, 1112. I'm trying to remember the Spanish designation, but they have one actually at the Air Venture Museum in Wisconsin.
From the movie?
From the movie.
Oh, very cool.
So they're a 4-bladed prop. They have Hispano engines. It's something really cool to see that I got to see there. At Oshkosh, it's typically American aircraft. But
it's the
HA 1112. That's right. Okay. But yeah, something really cool to see.
They're pretty, as common as those warbirds are. They're definitely more common than an original.
Yes, than a 109E. There's not many 109Es out there. I don't
think
know.
any are flying.
I don't I think there's one over in Europe,
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
but a lot of Spitfires out there. There's a couple around in the U.S. that are flying. There's a Mark 9 in Minot.
Yeah,
And
there is.
Is it a Mark 1 Hurricane they're restoring?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
hurricane out there that is under restoration.
So
But yeah, that's a place that we need to.
that's a
do.
video we need to
That is
cover. So,
awesome.
but yeah, I also forgot to mention. I don't know if you watched it yesterday, but the Arsenal of Democracy.
I missed it.
I watched a little bit. I didn't have too much time yesterday, but yeah, the Arsenal of Democracy. It's a massive amount of aircraft. I think we covered a little bit of it last time, just kind of introducing.
We touched on it.
Yeah, we in the beginning segments we were talking about what type of aircraft we're going to be. We're going to be there. A lot of commemorative Air Force aircraft. But yeah, it ended up.
What was it? Canceled?
Or it might have been canceled. I got to watch some of. They had some like pre-videos, but
yeah, I think it got canceled. That's too bad.
yeah, the weather kind of hindered them on Friday. I was getting all excited because that was the day I was more available to watch it. But
That's too bad.
yeah, so Mother Nature's not the nicest sometimes,
especially for air shows. It
Yeah.
seems like every time there's supposed to be a good air show, Mother Nature gets in the way.
and COVID.
I was gonna say whether it's COVID or rain or something like that.
But what do you do? I mean, eventually this thing will be over and we'll be hitting up some, yeah, definitely knocking on that one,
Yeah.
hitting up some air shows and fly-ins in the future.
It's gonna be. I will say the air show, the first air show after COVID is like Oshkosh 2021. Hopefully,
We're gonna have to, we have to make it out there.
That has to
I mean, we have to make that happen for
Yes.
this podcast. And
absolutely.
that we'd have hours and hours and hours of videos. But
Yeah, that would be
But-
amazing.
when I went there 4 years ago, I was frustrated because I didn't have enough time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
It's a
stuck in
week
the
long, and
I stuck in the warbird section for the most part. I'm also really interested in. I mean, they have one section where they had a C5 and
Mhm.
they had kind of the newer generation of aircraft, and then I'm also interested in vintage civil aviation.
Very cool.
So we have a Spartan back in here in the museum. That's something that I really have a soft spot for. So I like to go visit the Red Hangar, if any of you guys know about that at Oshkosh. And then I'll probably be stopping over at like UND and stuff like that next time around. But
Well, speaking of UND, I believe someone
yep,
kind of graduated up. Is that the
not
correct
graduated,
term?
but
Well, not graduated, but
we got the
explain.
yeah. Well, I actually on Friday I passed my commercial check ride. So at UND they do it a little bit different. Typically in a normal setting, there's two different regulations that flight schools fall under. There's Part 61, which is like you go into like a mom and pop type flight school, and there's 141 where it's an organized university or a very structured school. But through the Part 61, you need to have 250 hours for the commercial, whereas under the 141, you just kind of work through it. And I only have about 195 hours.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, I ended up passing that just by the hair.
Awesome.
I mean, that's what matters. But yeah, the check ride went good. I ended up getting that multi-engine rating along with my instrument rating.
Awesome.
So I got
That is
3 in
very
one
cool.
punch. So, unfortunately with COVID right now, the economy is kind of poor and job opportunities aren't out there right now. So I'm not pursuing any jobs right now. But I'm going for my flight instruction. I'm starting out actually this week. I just have to get cleared to enter into that. So I'll hopefully within the next few months I'll be a flight instructor. Moving on.
You can help me then.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really exciting and biggest milestone in my career so far.
Awesome,
So
dude. That's very awesome. Congratulations.
thank you. And it's really humbling to get that far. I mean, my grandfather was a pilot, commercial pilot.
Yeah.
Didn't have the instrument or multi-engine, so it's kind of he's giving me some crap talking about how I'm more rated than him now, but it's really cool to be a part of that. And then my cousin actually he's a pilot. He just actually got his private pilot a week and a half ago down in Eden Prairie, at Aviate Flight School.
Yeah.
He's flying similar aircraft to what we have at UND.
Nice.
So we got 3 pilots in our family now, maybe more if I get my brother on board.
There you go.
But yeah, it's really cool. It's kind of the family aspect to it too.
Awesome. Yeah. definitely makes it a much more special thing.
Yeah, and insurance goes down as
Yeah.
you get more experience, so I need some more of that. But yeah, and then I'll be doing some more flying videos now. I'm gonna have a lot more time on my hands now that on the weekends and stuff like that. So I'll be getting access to some aircraft, and maybe we'll get some videos up. We can go up and do some flying, and then next year when the flying season comes back, hopefully, got to knock a lot this video, but we'll end up doing some videos on that. So we have a lot of ideas for you guys out there. I mean, we have endless ideas. We have all these aircraft these are all opportunities for videos in the future. So expect some of that eventually. With COVID, obviously, we'll have some hurdles to jump, but we'll be sure to keep getting that content out to you guys.
Absolutely. I forgot to sign out, so I got to do that.
Oh,
right
yeah, no
now.
problem. But yeah, so with that, we're going to be getting, I'm planning on getting some updated camera equipment, some GoPros. I'm probably going to get a couple GoPros, just get them mounted on some aircraft for when we fly around. And then we do have a lot of cool ideas jotted down for you guys. Once we get into a few more of these episodes, we'll probably have some good opportunities for some hangar visits of pilots. We can talk airplanes with them. Short interviews. We probably won't keep that as part of the podcast unless, or like
if they'd be willing to.
If they were willing to come in with all the COVID stuff, it'd be awesome. But I do have a couple pilots who are willing to walk around their aircraft, and I do have one potentially that would take us up in an aircraft right now.
Really?
So it'd be kind of a cool video.
That would be very cool.
Be cool to throw in there. But yeah, keep an eye out on our page for some content. Both of us are quite busy, but we're going to be sure to get all this content out to you and just kind of keep it exciting.
Yeah. So we I think we've mentioned this in the past episodes, but the reactions and feedback that we've gotten from the first 2 episodes completely blew my expectations. Yes. And we're very grateful for that. So,
yes, very humbling.
Yep, it is.
And I got people from my high school who are like, "Oh, that's really cool." And a couple of years ago, I would have been like, "I don't want to share a podcast."
No, I'm the same way. I getting messages from people that I haven't talked to in a long time and saying like, "Hey, man, your podcast is really well put together. I enjoy watching it at work, and that's what we're here for."
It's a nice casual conversation. It doesn't need to be scripted.
We're not going, awesome. And
so.
we're not. I mean, as much as we'd like to delve into the nitty gritty details, I think just keeping it pretty casual for right now.
And I mean, you guys can always request stuff for us.
Please, absolutely.
We have ideas, but we want
to hear what you
exactly
want to hear, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to put out some walk around videos. Maybe we'll have to put up a survey of what they want first. Maybe we'll have to get, as you can see, like I'm kind of blocking it, but we got an F-16 right there.
That F-16, I mean, every plane in this hangar has history, but there is a lot of history behind that specific F-16. A lot.
That might be one we might have to get on pretty soon.
Hopefully the guard doesn't come back and snatch it before.
But hooligan history is huge.
We did,
we got a biased one over here with the hooligans, but
a little bit.
But we got plenty of content for you guys. A lot of history just in this building alone. There's 2 buildings here. If you guys haven't been to the Air Museum, of course we're gonna plug the Air Museum a lot, but there's plenty of history here to view. And Max, you'll see him behind the desk here.
Come in and say
come in and talk airplanes from him so he doesn't get too bored.
Please. Oh my gosh.
You can see all these airplanes. We can't go play with them. So
unfortunately.
But
I think our kebab flyer, in recognition of, was it on this day in 1954?
54, yes.
On this day in 1954, the North American Aviation F-100 took its first. No, it wasn't is entered service.
Entered
service. So our kebab flyer for the day is an F-100F Super Sabre. Serial number was 563855. Now, this aircraft is on display in Oaks, North Dakota, a bit out of the way, especially from Grand Forks.
Yes,
but even from Fargo, it's out in the boonies. And a friend of mine 2 summers ago was passing through when he worked there, and he sent me a picture. He's like, "Have you seen this F?" Or he doesn't. He said, "Have you seen this plane before?" And I was like, "What? No." So I was able to get more information from him, and I tracked it down, and it's a 2-seater. So
Okay.
I thought it was a trainer at first,
Mhm.
and after doing a little bit more research, I learned that like the F-100 was one of the few planes that the training versions were used in combat
Hmm.
as a forward air control aircraft. So this plane would have been monitoring. I think it had an Army observer in the back, monitoring where the airstrikes were coming in from other F-100s and Phantoms, I believe. But I believe if it was an F-100, it was mainly an F-100 mission strictly. But yeah, no, it's on display in Oaks. It's a Vietnam combat veteran. There's a lot of information on it. I can put the link to the post that I wrote about it a couple months ago at the beginning of COVID. Make that accessible if you want to read it. But she's lived quite the life. She was on display in New Mexico for a long time at a small museum before the museum, I believe, closed, and she ended up in North Dakota. She's one of the 2 F-100s on display in North Dakota as well. The other one is in Fesden, if I'm saying that correctly.
I think so.
Fessenden.
Yeah,
Fessenden,
I always have trouble
something
with that
along
one.
those lines. But the one in Pheasant Land, whatever you want to call it, is not in the best shape. Let's just say that. The message behind her is good, but the markings are lacking. I think you know which one I'm talking about. Yeah. So, yeah. On that note, that's the kebab flyer for the day is the F-100.
Yeah, and I'm surprised to, I don't Cold War uh, Cold War aircraft aren't really my specialty.
Yeah, no, I get that.
But I didn't really realize how long they were in service for.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the Guard retired them in the late 70s.
Yep. And they were used as drones up into definitely the late 80s, if not later than that.
And I saw a couple of Air Forces used them all the way up through the 80s and early 90s. And
no, they were extremely successful plane, especially in foreign markets. I know Turkey flew. They flew a lot of American ones. Turkey, I know Turkey was a big one. Germany had them. West Germany, to be specific. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's more, but those are the 2 that really come to mind. But no, a lot of the American ones were either expended as drones or sold off to foreign nations. But no, this one was a lucky one. She made it back, and she was actually so technically she is a QF-100.
Okay.
But she avoided the young rookie pilots over the Gulf of Mexico. So.
And yeah, they're also famous for flying for the Thunderbirds.
Oh, that's very true.
I believe they were the first supersonic aircraft to fly for the Thunderbirds.
Yep.
So I actually have a sign in my room here at my parents' house in Fargo with Thunderbirds on it.
Sweet. Yeah, actually, this one at the monument where it's on display at, which is actually very nice. Like, not bashing Oaks, but like in the middle of a very small town, it's very well put together. The plane is obviously beat up. It's been exposed to the elements for several years, but it's a very nice, very well put together display, and you can get right up next to it. I was not expecting that. So it's definitely worth visiting if you're into F-100s or Cold War aviation like I am. I've been trying to find the time to get back down there and hopefully do another video. But no, she's full of history and in dire need of a restoration. So, yeah.
And then I think we had one more. We had one more event today. First flight of the TSR-2.
Oh, that's right.
Such a sweet airplane.
Beautiful.
I know anybody from over the pond listen to this. They worship that aircraft.
Yes, they do. It's a shame that it never took off, pun intended. But beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Some cool concepts I've been seeing of like the NATO camouflage for the RAF, and it's such an interesting what if.
Yep.
Oh, and
absolutely.
Just about imagine. So.
Worth mentioning, definitely. I know there's only one surviving fully intact, and that's at the Imperial War Museum.
I believe so. Yes.
And then I believe there's I know at least one cockpit section. There might be more than one, but definitely one.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'm not the most versed on it, but it's the interesting aerodynamic aspects of it.
It was a nuclear strike bomber, right? Yeah.
Very high speed, and such a pioneer of its time.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's kind of a stretch saying this, but it's the XB-70 of Britain.
Mm.
Because you know the XB-70
Yeah.
behind that, it was such a revolutionary aircraft, and it never got rolling. And it's the same role. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think that covers everything for episode 3.
Yeah, and I think we'll. Are you cool with putting out a post or
Oh,
a
absolutely.
poll
Yeah,
on
I'll do the
what to
poll.
do a walk around?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Check some links down in the description. We'll have that video, that 172 taken off. We'll have the kebab flyer link to his post, and we'll probably throw the other articles down there too.
Yep.
So
sounds good.
So yeah. Thanks guys for watching or listening. Be sure to tell your friends about us, and
Please,
we really appreciate all the viewership and listening that you guys have been doing to our constant aviation rambles.
Yeah,
so
exactly. We're glad that others enjoy listening to us talk about it.
Yes, and we're still in our growing stage, and we're planning on always growing. And you'll see us branch out into some really interesting things. I'll have some flying videos, and you got a daily insight on the Air Museum here, so there's always developments
always
here.
something that I can do. I would like to start doing, like, if I have free time, like after museum close, just doing an Instagram live session where I walk around each individual plane, but pun intended, all up in the air. So we'll
got a lot of those today.
Got a lot of puns today, but yeah. All right.
Thanks guys for watching, and keep an eye out for our next podcast and potential walk around videos. So
cool.
We'll see you guys later.
Yep. Have a good one.